Alright, this is part 3, and I'm your host, Klikuiha, of Nani Naze Nihongo, the how and why of Japanese. Or actually, really, the how and why that I learned Japanese. So, the first two parts I discussed about how I was interested in Japanese culture and the language, and why, the how and why of I was into it, to where also how I learned it. So it's like how I learned it and why I learned it, more or less. I was into it, the culture, and I wanted to learn the language. And back in the day, it was like one of the languages, if you were going to be in corporate business or whatever, one of the money making languages to learn was actually Japanese, besides English. It's like if you're going to work with another company in a different country, it's always best to do is learn the language of that particular country. Makes it easier. So, for everybody on both sides, back and forth within the languages. Um, Now, part 3, I'm going to discuss the easy way of learning Japanese. Yes, I told you in the earlier parts how I learned it, of how difficult it is. For me, the immersive way was actually the easiest to, because at the time there was TV shows. There was actually there's a station at the time, still exists, but a lot of the Japanese programming is like non-existent, unless at one time they used to do was have Funimation. This is when digital TV came in, and almost every station had was the digital broadcast of their station, so they had multiple channels. So it was like their station was channel 18 KSI, and they had was one of their digital stations of, I think it was 18.2 or something. I'm not really too sure. I'll probably put the correction in the doobly doo. If I find it, I'll tell you. They had was the Funimation channel. This is when later on when Funimation actually had their own station. This was like in 2008 when I found out about that. That was later. All right, this is talking about in the 90s. All right. Um, all right. Besides all that, the easy way for you to learn, well, everybody's different. For me, the easiest way to learn any language for me was always to read and write it. I learned faster of reading and writing before speaking because I have always setbacks, such as that I never felt confident in myself of speaking to somebody in a different language, especially when a language that I'm learning and I don't want to sound like I'm an idiot, you know, and I don't. Well, that's the whole problem. The whole problem with a lot of people. You're going to make mistakes, and you don't want to make a mistake. Forget about trying not to make mistakes. Just go at it. Try your best. If you're going to speak to Japanese in Japanese, speak to somebody that actually is from Japan, maybe, or who speaks it fluently. Yeah, because you can only go so far. Like, let's say if you want to do is just take the damn JLPT tests, the Japanese language proficiency tests. If you want to just pass those, then you don't really need to know how to speak it. All you need to know is how to read and write in the freaking language. Because when you take the test, it's all written down. If you only know verbal and you see it written, you have no fucking clue. It could be Swahili for all you care. Just looks like whatever, like chicken scratch or Greek. Well, to me, it don't look like Greek. It looks like Japanese. So, yeah, the easiest way for me was reading and writing, and then practicing of speaking. Plus, I did was just like when you're a kid, when you're practicing your ABCs, you write each letter multiple times, like a whole entire page or several pages of the same freaking letter over and over and over. You do the same thing when you're learning, you know, hiragana, katakana, those two syllabaries. You just have to do that over and over and over again until you can, muscle memory, you can do it perfectly. For me, I'm like a perfectionist, so I saw how it looks like in the print form, which is based off of the brush stroke, actually drawn, using an ink brush. So that's how I write everything in Japanese. So it looks like it was by ink brush. And Fuji-san, Junko Fuji, or Fuji Junko, whatever you want to consider. My sensei, she told me that I have was beautiful handwriting because it looks like I did with a paintbrush, and it's all perfect size, whatever. And I just used like a pencil, or I had was a pen. I did that. Uh, and I find it easier for me, since I read it this way and I write it this way, so it matches, so anybody can understand and read my writing, as it were. I'm a perfectionist, so yeah. So she helped me out. She did was gave me a lot of other stuff. But yeah, like everyone will tell you, the easiest way is practice, 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 and it's actually a long, hard road. The textbook that I used was called Yokoso. That is one of the hardest ways of learning the Japanese language. Even when I did it in the early mid '90s, yeah, and even to this day, Yokoso, even if it may be easier to understand now, I don't know what its new printing is, their new issue of it, edition actually. It's a fucking hard book. If you're just going to learn it by yourself, it's going to be fucking hard. You want to do is take uh, an actual language course from someone that came from Japan over here. You know, that's what I'm telling you. That is one of the best ways of doing it because you're also having is the interaction, the verbal communication, so you can understand. Besides the reading and writing, and plus they will tell you and teach you other grammar. They'll teach you how people actually say words, how it's actually spoken versus the standardized perfect form. Just remember, in Japanese, you have is different levels of politeness based off of your level. In other words, not your ability to speak, but your social status, as it were, and the status of the person versus you. In other words, you have to use very high, you know, politeness of of polite words, as it were, a polite way of saying something, very polite to somebody that is really high above you, and then you can talk down to people that are lower than you. But I just learned it's always best to be freaking polite, even if they are on a lower social economic status than you. I treat everyone as equals, especially within language. To be polite, it's always the best thing. Yeah. My teacher said that she will never teach us bad kanji. In other words, she wasn't going to teach us any cuss words. No, no cussing. So yeah, Japanese is not easy. So I would say write it a lot. Make flashcards and just practice through flashcards. They also sell is like in Japan, they have is these flashcards that are like cards that are like this long, and you write it. They're called word cards. And you just do that. They use it to practice other languages. You could do the same thing for practicing Japanese. That's what I did. I also use them for things that I want to say whole entire sentences. So I practice that. Um, yeah. I also did was a lot of studying. Uh, the hard thing to do is, I would say, watching anime, because anime is one of the hardest things to do of learning Japanese, because a lot of the characters will be using words you don't normally hear in Japanese, or you probably wouldn't even understand, because a lot of it is slang, and a lot of it they're speaking really fast, and others are speaking in different dialects. See, I was taught was proper Japanese from the Tokyo dialect. That's kind of standardized. Tokyo dialect is kind of standard. Then you have is the different dialects. There is a shitload of dialects in just Honshu, and then you go into Kyushu and Shukaku, Suikaku. If you want to, Hokkaido has a different dialects altogether too. It's like so it's kind of Kyushu, uh, even you have the Kanto region, you know all of that. So and it gets kind of like you're a foreigner and you're like new to language. These different dialects will throw you off, because each one of them also has slangs that only differs to their territory. That's actually common use. So certain words that you learned in one region will not apply in another. A lot of times they might understand, but you probably won't understand their slang for that region. Just how it is. See, that's why Japanese learning Japanese through anime is it can be done, but it's one of the toughest ways of doing it. Okay, I'm just telling you, it is freaking tough when you're just listening in pure Japanese and they're speaking way too fast. A lot of voice actresses can speak like one. She was known as she became Excel in Excel Saga. She was hired because she was like considered when she spoke her lines, she was like a machine gun. Brrr, just of how fast and how proficient, without slurring words or anything. She got like a shitload of dialogue in a short period. But if you're not proficient, it will just be too fast and you can't understand it. The best way of if you're gonna watch something, watch the Japanese news programs. I don't mean the ones where have from Japan and they're speaking in English. No, you want the ones from FCI or from TV Tokyo or TV Asahi, or different news organizations or channels. Go online, watch the Japanese news broadcast, because they will speak standard dialogue, kind of like this, usually in this tone. Well, different regions have local news where they kind of like that. Some of the news broadcasts are more upbeat. They speak with a normal, flow, but they're not too fast and not too slow. They're perfect speed, so it's a normal speed of understanding and be able to learn how to speak the words. Since we have YouTube now, you could actually go back and back and back, just run that one word they say over and over and over. Because I used to have tapes, and back in the day we had was tapes, we had was VCRs, there was DVDs that came out. We had CDs, we had VCDs, which were video CDs, and before that we had with all those, except for audio tapes and VHS, and we also have earlier technology in the 80s of the early disc formats, which was Laserdisc, which was basically what it looks like, and this is what it was. It was a silvery metallic record. That's right, a record. An LP size, a 33 and a third size record. They actually came in, on record albums when they were sold. Still kind of cool, you know. My science teacher has a lot of discs of CD of laser discs. He has a shitload of them, and he's a science teacher, and he shows them in his class, and they're like awesome. I mean, the format, everything, for its time, it was like, oh, the digital format, that they did. It was actually quite amazing, for the time. So, yeah. So just do the same thing like how you learn how to read and write in your language. Usually, if you're watching this, you learn how to read and write in English. So in Japanese, you're going to do the same thing. Flashcards, you're going to write things down over and over and over again. Um, you're going to play it on audio cassettes and just try to repeat what they say. And it's just going to take some time. There is no one correct way of doing it. The only way is to do what works for you and keep on doing it and don't give up. It's not an easy language to learn if no matter what. It just isn't. It's not the hardest, but it's not easy. um, for some people, they would say, "Oh yeah, it's easy. I learned it." Yeah, you're like talking out of your ass, or you're talking like, "Oh yeah, you're really proficient," but you're like trying to say it's really easy. Well, yeah, your proficiency level is much higher than when you first start. Because if you listen to a lot of people saying, "Well, it's easy. It's easy for me. I was able to do it like that." Bullshit. No one can do it like that. Even if you're in Japan, you're starting to learn a language. Reading and writing it is tough. So, see you next time. The fuck?